Hi everyone, here's part 2 of the Simulation Matrix reality video, where I try to clarify what this reality is, how it works. So just to recap, basically the premise is we simulate an environment that we see, the ones that we see with our eyes, with our five senses, because otherwise we'd be lost in infinite energy, pure energy that has no shape or no form. So it's the same as why you don't interact with a computer using ones and zeros, which is the only thing that exists, because you'd go crazy. And so you create an interface, a convenient interface to interpret what's happening in a computer. And that interface, understand that we are the one that created it, or let's say that it's an evolutionary process. That is, the whole point of the interface is to be able to run the computer, but not break it. If you have control over ones and zeros, you can make your computer run backwards, you can do all kinds of crazy things, and that would break the matrix or this interface. And since there's nothing outside the interface wants to keep itself alive and not create inside of it people that can destroy it. You could arguably say that we're close to doing that because, of all climate change and all kinds of other problems, World War III or whatnot. But the interface was still clever enough that we would at least only destroy our little part of the simulation and not the whole part. So it's really finding balance. It's the whole point. Now, just to explicit a little bit more why there is nothing outside of the interface. Either you are pure consciousness, pure awareness of all that is, or you are pure energy potential. That is actually the only two things that exist. Pure energy and potential, pure consciousness. And consciousness gives energy a form. This means that whenever you experience anything at all, you are in the world of form, which means you are a consciousness which gives energy, pure energy and potential, a specific form. This means that this reality is form. Life after death. Life after death is a form. Higher dimensions is a form. You're still in the world of form. All you're doing is shifting your consciousness to change the form that you give pure potential or pure energy. So it's the same as moving from MS-DOS to Windows. Your interface changes, but it's still an interface. And so people trying to exit the matrix are kind of, they will be able to exit the matrix because they will imagine a form of how that exit looks like, and that exit will indeed materialize, and they will get to experience whatever form they think this exit is. Because they can create it out of pure consciousness and out of pure energy. Consciousness can mold energy into to see whatever it wants to see if it disconnects from the network. That's something that I explained as well, is that this is a consensus reality. That means you vote with all other people on what this reality should look like. Whereas dreams, you have 100% control. Oh, this is so annoying. What's happening? So now I wanted to explicit a number of things. First of all of the higher dimensional beings that we contact, be it ETs, Jesus, Buddha, all of them are on a different interface, a different level of consciousness. And that means that they're running Windows when we're running MS-DOS, which means that they can communicate with us a little bit, and we cannot understand at all what they're seeing and what they're doing. And of course, each and every one of them is sending us messages saying, please update your interface to match ours. The problem is, on the other side of what we call the veil, let's say this is the matrix of humans that we've created, and on the other side there is ETs and all kinds of things. I encourage you to look at my Fractal Universe video where I explain this very well. The thing is, if you install one specific interface, then you'll experience one specific future, one specific timeline. So either if you listen to the UMO science and the UMO, they will hint at one thing. If you listen to Pleiadians, they'll say do something else. They'll say Arcturians will say do something else. Obviously, you know, this idea of love and you know, each and every one of us behaving like a collective global organism, that is the universal principle. That is what we have to do. But then the actual experience on the other side and how that translates into action, that's up to us. That is really up to us. So, you know, it boils down to, should we install Linux? Should we install Windows? And that's up to each and every single one of us, actually. Which means that the people that believe in one of these interfaces and listen to only Pleiadians or Arcturians, it's like if they would jump into the future and merge with that timeline. And so people will basically get separated, I guess, depending on what interface they choose to install or to update to. And that's the whole idea of New Earth versus Old Earth, but actually there are many different variations here. The thing is, of course, it works just like this lock-in effect and mass joining effect of online platforms. You know, like why is everybody on Facebook? Because everybody else is on Facebook. So, you know, once a certain interface, once certain people have settled on a good interface, it will have an effect on all other people, and it will sort of, you know, encourage all other people to join. So you'll have, in the very early days, you had like MySpace, you had Facebook, you have a few of these emerging, and then gradually, you know, competitors like MySpace disappeared, and you had only Facebook surviving. And I guess it's the same kind of principle. Different people right now are exploring different interfaces, different possibilities. One where you have like these reptilians, Jesus, I'm so bad at this. Reptilians, terrible spelling. One, we have these evil reptilians that are keeping us, you know. One where you have these evil archons. One where you have the cabal that is controlling all of us, blah, blah, blah. And you see, that is a particular interface. That is a way to, and this is very important now, this is probably one of the most important aspects here that I want to clarify. It's just a way to display symbolically a symbolic representation of what happens when a certain wave pattern meets a wave pattern which menaces or threatens to cancel it out of existence. That is, imagine if your consciousness is this wave. And how would you perceive an other consciousness that is this wave and that is interacting with you? Because if you merge those two waves, they cancel each other. Both perceive the other as a threat. And so, while all we're doing is, okay, this is really important. It touches on the good vs evil dichotomy. All there is Source God. There's nothing else but source God. But understand that in source God, if everything is a vibration, then for each vibration, you have a vibration of opposite phase. And when you superimpose them, they disappear, which means that from the perspective of this wave, that one is evil. And from the perspective of this wave, that one is evil. And so the way to get out of it, the way to transcend good vs evil, is to shift your perspective. And how do you do that? Well, imagine if you are a consciousness which can manipulate its own vibration, which is what we're kind of doing when we decide to feel good about something or positive or whatever. We are modulating our own vibration. And imagine if you could just shift your vibration a little bit that way, and then your wave transforms into a wave that matches this one. So you're compatible now. And the interaction between your new you, the one that shifted its point of view, and whatever you're interacting with will now be positive and not negative. Give you a concrete example. Imagine if this is you and this is a threatening dog. Please don't kill me because I'm really, really bad at drawing. It has its teeth, ready to jump at you and devour you. Obviously, bad vibes. You're going to sense, basically, the dog is vibrating at a certain level, and his vibration is a certain vibration. You're vibrating at a certain level. And whatever you see, whatever you perceive with your five senses, is just a symbolic representation of the interaction between his vibration and your vibration. So if you change your vibration, to just shift your perspective and see if you can understand the dog, see if you can do or act in a certain way which makes you look less threatening. This is continually annoying me. Then there's no problem. Then this disappears and the threat disappears. And it's through knowledge, of course. For instance, you have experience with dogs. It's through self-introspection, fixing, things from the inside. So the whole point here of ascension and consciousness is to consciously be able to navigate in both positive and negative energies at will, and shifting you from the inside to be compatible with negative, so that when you're in negative it's actually positive, and when you're in positive, when you're in the negative, it's actually you transform yourself into positive, and it's positive. And don't forget that these are just matters of points of view. How would you say this is this vibration evil? Is this vibration evil? It's silly to think of them that way. But the interaction between the two, if they're incompatible, of course will be perceived as either evil or good. So it's, in order to transcend it, you need to shift your point of view depending on where you're at, and therefore nothing can affect you because you can just navigate in both positive and negative without any form of problem. That's the whole point. Now, also, I want to clarify why there's such an interest from ETs and, Jesus and all of these to update for us, for our update. Why are they interested so much in planet Earth? Well, you'll have to watch my video on perfect symmetry, free will, or the few other videos that I've done to understand why, for one reason, because free will, a planet where there's free will, is very exceptional and plays a very important role. But the second part is, remember that I talked about Nick Bostrom's simulation theory? And I said that basically the shortcomings is that you could actually see the universe as if whatever civilization that created us managed to create a quantum computer within which a quantum computer within which we are simulated, then that civilization may also have been created by another civilization with a quantum computer, and so on until infinity. So you could think of the universe as simulations nested into each other into infinity. So it makes no sense to talk about simulation. The whole thing breaks down because of this infinite loop. But what's interesting about this is that it actually may be a simulation within a simulation within a simulation, because of this consciousness, these consciousnesses nested one inside the other that I've talked about. Like you have pure consciousness is the whole thing, which of course never ends because it's infinite. So consciousness, pure consciousness, infinitely expands, and the moment it's complete, it's not complete. It creates another simulation, and then another simulation. But what's nice is that even within the simulation, if you update one of them, it reverberates across all of the others because they're interdependent. You see, they're connected. It's like if you upgrade your graphics card on your computer, it will have an impact on all of the other parts. And so helping us now here with our interface and updating the interface reverberates across all of the other simulations. And in order to understand this, you need to really transcend the idea of time and space being linear. Because here you could see that some of these ETs may be us in a distant future on a specific timeline where we invent quantum computers, or we invent a type of science that allows us to travel to other galaxies and spread life. And one of these ETs will be one of the life forms that we create in the future, which can visit us in the past and update us so that we don't have to go through, like, let's say, another world war or a period of 2,000 years of darkness or whatever, and just update now to a better interface, which means that in their future, we manage to also upgrade them in a certain way, or they can evolve further. Everything is interdependent, you see. I mean, upgrading your graphics card helps. Updating your motherboard completely allows you to do new things, including new hardware. So helping one part of the simulation helps all of the other parts. That's why there's such an interest in helping us right now. Let's see, have I explained everything? Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Just wanted to say that why is this idea of the Cabal and reptilians and all of these other theories, why won't they be part of the next interface, and why will they not make the cut? Because they're still in duality. There's nothing in here that overcomes duality. You're still in judging that the Cabal is evil and reptilians are evil. Whereas the reason, the explanation that I gave about the vibrations being incompatible and one perceiving the other one as being evil is really a transcending duality. So this is also something that I want to talk about. Great that I remember this. In our reality, we create training wheels for the different things that we will be able to do in the future once we update it, so that we behave responsibly. Smartphones is a symbolic representation of the growth of our telepathic powers. You could see the exponential growth in communications as our gradual ability to expand our telepathic powers and communicate directly to the other person's mind. Why is it incremental? Why do we first have landlines, and then smartphones, and then earpieces, and then whatever, a chip in our brain? Why don't we just jump directly to telepathy? Because don't forget, anything that's inside this reality is just a symbolic representation of interactions of pure energy with, or pure consciousness between itself. Well, why? It's because we have to first learn to responsibly use smartphones. Like, imagine if we could directly be telepaths and communicate with each other. Well, imagine, what about privacy? What about the right to disconnect? What about our addiction to always be on our smartphones? We first have to solve this and find balance within the hardware that we have, or the symbolic representation. And once we have that, once we find a sort of balanced and healthy way to use smartphones, then we can shift towards the next stage. How about this? 3D printing. 3D printing. That's the symbolic representation for materializing things with our thoughts. Yeah. The gradual ability that we have to manufacture and produce things easily, the more easily and on a much massive scale, is a symbolic representation for being able to directly materialize things with our thoughts. And again, why don't we all have the ability to materialize whatever we want with our thoughts? It's because we would use this power very irresponsibly given the level of consciousness that we have. So first, each and every one of us will have this 3D printer. You'll have plans that will be shared online to do whatever, to print a gun, to print a knife, to print a tool, whatever tool you can think of, anything you want. And then probably we'll go through a phase where people print guns, and then we'll say, okay, that's not such a good idea maybe, and learn from that experience, and then we can move on. Then we can move to the next level. And so what I'm trying to say is basically, I'm speaking here as if this update idea or upgrade idea is new. Like we haven't done this before. But that's false. Actually, every time someone comes up with a new theory, even in science or whatever, it allows us to create new things, new symbolic representations that increases our power and changes our interface. I mean, the world of 1500, if you take someone from the 1500s and take them to today and our interface, they'd think they'd gone completely crazy, that this is a wild dream or nightmare. So when we discovered, for instance, electricity, the kind of world that we could create with electricity is insanely more complex, and you can do insanely new things that you couldn't do before that theory or that idea was discovered. And ultimately what we've done here when we discover new scientific theories is just updating the interface. That's all we're doing. It's like disinhibiting or raising our consciousness in order to do more things by creating a symbolic representation for things that we can do just like as a pure consciousness. So again, Cabal reptilians won't make the cut because they're still in duality. They're not theories which are able to sort of see the Cabal and the reptilians for what they really are. I'm thinking that basically all of this process is like the growth of a plant. From the time it's a seed, then a sprout, then it grows a little bigger. That is basically humanity. You could think of this as Adam and Eve or whatever, you can choose any metaphor. And then gradually we grow. At what time is this evil? At what time is it good? It's just growth. We are growing, we're expanding. Our organism, the global organism that we're a part of is expanding, is growing. We have more and more humans on planet Earth. And, at some points there are little bugs that come on the plant and attack it. At other times there's like drought and there are like a few leaves that fall off. But when you look at a plant growing in that way, you don't judge it. It's actually perfect at each and single moment because you see it as growth. You see it as expansion and just a natural way of life. Why can't you see humanity's growth as being the same thing? Any kind of wars that we have or violence, if you just shift your perspective, you understand that if you think of humanity as a global organism, where each and every one of us is like one cell, it's continually shifting, I don't know why, then wars is the same thing as when you tell your 2-year-old, don't put your hand on the burner, you're going to burn yourself. Careful. And the 2-year-old doesn't listen and puts his hand on the burner and burns himself. And there are millions and millions of cells that have to die. And the 2-year-old then says, ooh, maybe it's not such a good idea that I put my hand on the burner. And then learns from that experience and moves on, hopefully. So, yeah, there were probably better ways to learn than to experience World War I, World War II, and all kinds of horrors. But ultimately, when you see your 2-year-old doing these mistakes, as a parent, how do you react? Like, ha ha, I told you so, you idiot. And then you put them in the bathroom, close the door, let them cry for I don't know how many hours. No, you say, well, you could have listened to me, but let me heal you. Let me help you. Let me assist you because I love you. And so, whether it's Jesus, whether it's ETs, whether it's God, source, whatever, that is exactly the same kind of frame of mind they have when they see us. They see us as raising our consciousness in our interface gradually, and sometimes having to learn through harsh experiences. Sometimes we can just listen to their teachings and learn via thought. And this is the actual, we are mirroring the evolution of a child, because a child has to learn from experience and doing mistakes when they're very young. And then when they reach, 5 or 6 year old, they can actually simulate in their minds what would happen if they crossed the street without looking, what would happen if they use a knife irresponsibly, and they don't have to experience it anymore to learn from it. They can simulate it. They can project themselves and see that it can hurt them. And it's the exact same process for us. For instance, this is another interesting thing to remember. Babies. How do their interfaces get programmed? By us. I have an interesting anecdote, for instance. When my daughter was born, they had to take a sample of her blood, and they pricked her little hand with a syringe, and because her veins were so tiny, they were like poking this needle inside her hand like for 3 minutes, honestly, to find that vein. And my daughter was, she was like acting like nothing was happening. And I was stunned. I was like, hey, this must be really, really painful. I mean, imagine if somebody stuck a needle in your hand and then was just like poking for 3 minutes inside your hand. Well, the thing is, babies, when they're born, their consciousness is not limited to their bodies yet. They have a consciousness of everything, which is why they think that mommy and daddy are part of their body. And they actually feel what you feel. And they feel what the room feels. That's why you can explain that babies, for instance, calm down when parents went somewhere and they come back and they're like within 50 meters and the baby sort of sense that their parents are back, because their consciousness is much wider than just their body. And by touching them continuously, by saying, this is you, this is you, this is you, their consciousness shrinks to say, oh, I'm this body. This is me, and this is not me. This I have to I have to cuss this out from my perceptions. And we train them in understanding how this reality works. We train them, we sort of pass on our interface to them, and then they transcend it. Then they transcend it, they either they create new theories, they discover new things, and this is how progress happens. You transmit your interface, and then the next generation sort of goes a little bit beyond that. I hope this was useful in clarifying certain number of things, and happy to have any further questions if you have any. Oh, actually, I wanted to say one last thing. Maybe a few hints of further action and what the future would look like from my perspective. If we take that we are all just one big collective organism, and that what we see in reality, I'm so bad at drawing, is a symbolic representation of pure energy, then, or the fact that we are a collective organism in this instance, and that each and every one of us is like one cell inside a larger collective organism that we cannot imagine, just like our cells cannot imagine what it feels like or what it is like to be human, then you could see that the heart in this global organism is the financial system. The circulatory system in the human body is charged in distributing energy, oxygen, to all of its cells, and keep them healthy, keep them well energized to be able to do their jobs. The financial system is in charge of distributing money to all of the citizens. And in this sense, energy, oxygen, and money is the same thing. In our reality, that is. Money is the energy that allows you to do things. Of course, it's a little bit oversimplified because there are other sources of energy, such as food, such as oxygen, still, because it's nested realities, one inside the other, remember? So you have whatever you can do as a single human without being part of this global organism, and then is what you can do as a part of this global organism, and money is therefore the energy that is valid in the larger organism, to a big extent. Internet is the nervous system. This is going to be chaotic here. It's the nervous system. It's what allows to send information to the collective organism and then, collect the information and then act on the information. And it's still kind of, chaotic, and, you can't really make efficient decisions because there are contradictory messages going everywhere. People, conspiracy theories, all kinds of different crazy things going on. And notice that just look at how a newborn is when they are born. Can they coordinate their movements very well? Do they have any coordination? No, they don't. They move in a very chaotic way. They move, their hands just swing chaotically from one side to the other, and they gradually get control over their limbs, over their bodies. And so it's the same thing with the internet, basically. Right now, if you could see ourselves from the outside as a collective organism, we would be moving in all sorts of directions in a very chaotic way, just like a newborn. And so we just have to learn to harness our nervous system to, raise our consciousness in order to act in a more orderly fashion, let's say. And so when people are talking about the financial reset, it's because it's a necessity. Right now, the financial system works in very suboptimal ways, where some cells in this collective organism are starved, and others are extremely well fed and extremely wealthy, and it's almost as if you had like one arm that was huge and then tiny little legs that are so skinny that you might almost die. That's not very efficient, not very optimal. And so when you hear ideas like universal basic income, for instance, what's that? It's just how our body works, basically. Maybe I'll go more into depth, more concretely on how this will work, but it's every single cell deserves a certain minimum amount of energy, and then they get energy in excess when there is a need. That is exactly how our bodies function on the inside, and that is what we are trying to replicate on the outside. As I said, as within, so without. So right now, if you would say how our financial system works, mirrored as the circulatory system in the body, we would have a huge, huge heart. That's the financial system, the banking sector, that sucks up most of the energy and keeps it to itself, and then distributes energy quite inefficiently, starving some people and making some people extremely wealthy. Whereas what our body does is, first, the heart is exactly the size it's supposed to be, and then the energy gets distributed on your body depending on the needs. When you run, energy is focused in your legs. When you think, energy is focused to your brain. And this happens seamlessly, and the energy, whenever you run, for instance, the energy sort of peaks, and then it declines when you stop running. When you start thinking, the energy peaks again. There's a lot of energy, a lot of oxygen flowing to your brain, and then it sort of diminishes gradually over time. And so that's exactly how our financial system should work and will work ultimately. And it's not because it's good. It's not because it's evil. It's just because it's a collective organism, and if it didn't work that way, you would die. That's all. There is no other reason. There's no better reason than just being alive. And that is the reason that transcends good and evil. Like, we don't think of, when we ask the question, why does our circulatory system work the way it does? Why do our legs function the way they do? Blah, blah, blah. We don't think of that in terms of good versus evil. We just think about it as what keeps you alive? What keeps this show going? How can this work so that you don't die as a collective organism? And that reason is way more powerful than any kind of other explanations, saying, well, we have to do this because it's good, we have to do this because whatever. It's a transcendental reason. It's just because otherwise you'd be dead. That's all. Or your interface would die, basically. So that is the more practical implications for applying the simulation theory and the fact that reality is a symbolic representation for just pure energy, is that you create on the outside what you are on the inside, and then that process repeats into infinity. I hope this was useful, and again, if you have any specific questions, happy to answer them.